Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. So today I wanted to talk about the idea of harm none and my current thoughts on it. So over the years I've mentioned this, but I started off Wiccan, and of course one of the main Wiccan beliefs is the belief in harm none. And as time has gone on, I've kind of fluctuated a bit on what exactly that means. A lot of witches do fall under the umbrella of following the idea of harm none, but there's still quite a few who don't. It's not to say that they don't have morals or ethics, but they just don't believe in the idea of harm none. And I'm slowly kind of venturing towards that side of it because the idea of harming none is just really not plausible. So to begin with, the way I was taught is that harm none applies to physically, emotionally, spiritually, and also applies most of the time to all humans, animals, and plant life. The problem with that, you can see, will arise very quickly. You harm a plant a lot of times when harvesting. It could also harm the land by what you're planting. Farmers will know that you can only plant certain things so many times before you've stripped that ground of nutrients, then you have to plant something else, and that could be seen as harm. Also, the ways that we have to go about getting a lot of our food are not always the greatest. There's a lot of human abuse, land abuse that goes into anything, really. And so look at the rainforests that have been torn down to make fields for cattle, for crops, whatever. Like, there's a lot that goes into the harm aspect that makes it so that we can exist today. It is very, very rare that we're creating our own farms and living off of the food we've grown for ourselves the entire time, not going to the grocery store at all for any supplies. Which then there's the harm that comes from the foods that's brought into the store and the environmental impact of the trucks and planes and boats that it takes to get the stuff imported and exported around the world. But then it's also harmful to not have a connected world anymore because, like, it's kind of nice to have the ability to see the world as a whole now and not just your itty bitty little region that you live in. Now the entire globe is basically connected. We can talk to people all over the world in an instant. That's something our ancestors did not have, and that's a great tool, and we need that so that we can understand all of the different cultures. But also the ability to do that is kind of harmful because, like, the tools and supplies that we need to do that are probably not great for the environment either. And then of course, from the human aspect, the idea of harm none, it gets real complicated fast. The most common one that pops up a lot is what you eat. And the idea of what you eat being harmful is a really tricky path. Of course, some foods are not terribly harmful, but again, we just talked about the farming aspect of it. But then also the big debate is animal products. The vegan argument is very big in a lot of the Wiccan and witchcraft communities, and it does have its place and it does have its time. And trying to live a more sustainable life is great in theory. It doesn't work for everybody, and I know the vegans really love to get up in arms about it. And so it comes down to your own morals, and how can you say that you harm none if you choose to have a steak or you choose to have a glass of milk? And especially if it's not something you personally killed and, you know, butchered and did all of this stuff, and you've raised the cow and fed it and then milked it. You know, like, the harm aspect there. It gets really complicated fast. But then also, having a perfect vegan or vegetarian's easier, but a vegan life, which I tried for many years, it's really hard to fall into the harm none law because then you start to harm yourself unless you live by a very strict diet. And I mean, you have to do veganism correctly, otherwise you definitely don't get the nutrients you need. And doctors will constantly warn you that you have to do it very specifically. If you want to, they'll support you, but you have to do it their, like, very specific way. Otherwise, you're going to be deficient in a lot of stuff, and most of them have to take supplements. Anyways, there's a big debate. But that's usually, like, the biggest part of it, and I left veganism, and I will not go back. As terrible as it is, I would love to be vegan, I would love to be vegetarian. It just doesn't work for me anymore. I really love not being sick all the time, and actually having energy to do stuff, and being able to function. It's great. And so, if you're vegan, if you're vegetarian, and that works for you, fantastic. I'm glad it's working for you. You can keep to the diet that's working, and that's awesome. But that's why I really started to struggle with the idea of harm none, let alone the idea that you're having to buy so many products when you are vegan and you're trying to follow, like, the whole food plant-based diet, not just, like, the easy, like, pre-made vegan foods, the imports that are needed to keep that food in stock is also still in the harm category, again, environmental. And so like the idea, because there's a lot of them that promote like eating so many bananas a day, those don't grow locally here. We don't have a lot of foods that grow local here and can survive the winters. Like right now it's a blizzard, and so like there's just so much that causes harm, and then harming others as in other humans can be really difficult as well, because if you do a prosperity spell while you're harming the person, you know, if you find $100 bill, well, another person lost a $100 bill, therefore harm, right? And of course everyone loves to point out that there's a gray area in the harm none, but that's why a lot of authors who don't follow harm none kind of point out that it's more of just ethics and morals of the world we live in right now, because they have definitely changed over the many years. And so it's more of just look at what we approve of now as a society and trying to stick with those and just being an overall good person. But to try to avoid harm completely is really hard, and I'm starting to fall into that category more than trying to fall into the harm none completely category. Because again, it's not to say that I'm promoting to be like a douchebag, like please don't be an asshole, don't be a dick, but at the same time, there is a time and a place for certain spells, there's just a certain way of living. Again, I came from veganism, I will not be going back ever, but that definitely falls into a harm category. And it's how do your morals fit into that? And then also, you know, doing harmful spells against people. And some would argue that sending energy back at a person who sent you bad energy is harmful. I see zero problem with it. I just feel like I'm helping karma along her way. And so it just gets really complicated when you try to think about harm none and how it works out for you. And that's why I'm kind of leaning more towards like just trying to have good ethics and good morals. Try not to harm people. It's reciprocal. You do something to me, I'll probably do something to you. Whether it's direct, magically, going to the cops, whatever. I don't think it's a bad thing if somebody attacks you to take the actions to deal with them. And again, I'm going to eat the foods that make me feel better and make me feel healthier, and I can actually start to take control over my body again and not trying to fit into a diet that I don't enjoy and I don't like. And it's very hard, again, to do it properly. And so it really just comes down to the morals. A lot of us would agree that murder is wrong, but even then, there's a gray area, because it's pretty split down the middle, I still think, that, like, the death penalty. And, like, there's just so many things of ethics and morals that we need to consider, and, like, how does harm none play into, like, women's rights? And, like, there's just so much that, like, the harm none law, I just feel like has gotten too constrictive for me to, like, embrace. Like, it really, for me, just comes down to kind of adjusting and acknowledging, like, where my morals stand, because even though a lot of times witches and pagans and Wiccans and the whole umbrella of people here typically are going to be pro-choice, for example, not everybody is. And some people would say that it's harmful, that going through an abortion is really hard on your body and it's harming yourself, because it is a lot that your body has to go through to have an abortion. It's also a lot for your body to go through to have a human. But either way, like, there are people in these communities who aren't supportive of it. I think they're more of a minority, really, but still, I'm sure they exist. And then again, harm none, are you harming the, like, lump of cells? Or is it life begins at the first breath? And, like, there's a lot of debate about so many aspects of life, of where does harm none really fall? And how hard are you going to stick with it? And I've just gotten to the point where it's like, you know, it's good in theory. I don't know how practical it is. And a lot of people try and get around it by saying, like, the least amount of harm. And I feel like that's a better way of putting it. But of course, it's still going to be a huge gray area. What's the least to me is not going to be the same to you. And so it's just a really big gray area, but I just wanted to chit chat about this a little bit. So anyways, I would love to hear your thoughts on where you stand on harm none and other kind of laws of living, so to speak, and what ones you follow and why and all of that jazz. So let me know in the comments down below, and until next time, thank you so much for watching. Thank you to my patrons. I'll have their names over here. If you would like to support me and get access to exclusive content, it is patreon.com/nightwillowcrafts. And until next time, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you all tomorrow.